Right now at 5, one of the suspects accused of burning a cross to try to intimidate a Black Charlotte couple is facing new charges.
So bond has been set now for $10,000 for Alexis Hartnett and also for indecent exposure for an arrest. Totally separate charge. Details now are limited, but we do know that the victim is a man who was with 2 young children at the time of this incident. Now, Hartnett and her boyfriend, Warden Butler, you see right here, are facing harassment charges stemming from the incident that is now sparking calls for more penalties for hate crimes in South Carolina. And let's bring in now Chief Legal Analyst Callie Rhodes to this conversation. So there's a lot here to unpack, but how did we get here? Two separate charges.
Can't unpack too much because if we got folks doing indecent exposure, there may be issues with this type of case. But what we can say is that her defense attorney is saying that she's had some type of mental health issues, and so that would be the defense to the mental health, to the indecent exposure. Regarding the hate crimes, it's the burning of a cross in the backyard of their neighbors. These neighbors have had issues with each other over the years, and so on Thanksgiving they thought it was the best idea to burn a cross in the middle of their Black neighbors' yards. They took out charges against them in terms of intimidation, and those charges are still pending. Additionally, the family moved to try to get them evicted from that property. Actually, the prosecutor's office or the solicitor's office in South Carolina, as they call it, and that's something that you don't normally see. The solicitor's office attempted to get them to determine that that property was a nuisance, and if it's determined a nuisance, then law enforcement would come and take the property, and then obviously you can't live there if law enforcement's taking it. That's the route they've went. Their attorney said, listen, I don't even represent them. I represent the house, and you guys should not categorize this as a nuisance off of one incident. And so that's where that fight is. But the hate crime is the bigger portion and the reason that we are here. South Carolina doesn't have a hate crime. They're at the race to the bottom. Them and Wyoming, the only 2 states in the country that don't have a hate crime in the state. The House passed it. It's been sitting in the Senate. If it sits there until June, they'll have to try to do this all over again like they did 2 years ago. And so that's problematic.
And in this situation, it's the intimidation and then the association with that is fueled by race. That is what constituted as a hate crime.
That is what constitutes it as a hate crime, and that's what escalates it as a hate crime. And so you've already had the underlining crime. And then if it was that my intention was to do this solely because it was based on race, so now I have additional punishment. And then that's not that they will be no charges. It just means now the federal government has to come in. Now the Department of Justice has to come in and allow their Civil Rights Department to handle this type of charge. But in most states, like North Carolina, the state's Department of Justice would come in, the Attorney General's office would handle this, and it would be a hate crime on the state level. And so South Carolina just needs to figure out how they can make sure that becomes a law. And the opponents of this are saying that they don't want that to happen, that there are other things that you don't want to have happen. Why the state shouldn't have a hate crime? We have a pastor's talking about an LGBTQ, and now someone could bring out charges against them for hate speech. And so those are the arguments that they've raised. On the other side, you have folks that were victims in the Emmanuel shooting. And you're like, well, this happened and a state senator was killed in the shooting. And so those are the types of things that you are seeking to have additional enhanced punishments for to deter those types of crimes. You would think it would be a no-brainer. I'm not sure why the state has sat on its hands on this one.
I was an anchor in Columbia, South Carolina when Emmanuel 9 happened, so we covered that extensively, especially trying to be able to get a hate crime law passed. For this particular case, how would passing a hate crime law impact a case like this that we're seeing in Horry County?
You'd see states would have control of the case as opposed to the federal government, and you see individuals have, instead of maybe getting 5 or 6 years for a crime like this, maybe getting 10 or 20. The enhancement of a state-level hate crime would be detrimental for sure, and the states would be able to have their hands on it. That would be the quickest thing I could say.
Callie Rhodes, we appreciate your insight always. Thank you.